Hey there, Mick back again, this time with my top 20 rock archival and reissues for 2024. Okay, let's start off with the Ramones, Road to Ruin. Now this came through the Rhino High Fidelity series, and breaking my first rule of 2024, which was don't buy albums that you already have. And I've got two versions of this. Anyway, this reissue was just too hard for me to go by. So I guess the key point is it's been remastered at Coherent Audio by Kevin Gray, my favourite mastering engineer. And I guess it's the epitome of punk rock audiophile. They had a couple of other issues come out, but for me, for this year, this was the premiere Ramones release. Number 19, East Village Dropout, a band I first came aware of through the Summershine label in Australia. East Village are, I guess, indie pop band, and this is a reissue of their 1990 album Dropout. It's one of those albums that's now worth $300, so certainly worth while to pick up the reissue, and it's in a beautifully tip-on jacket. Number 18, Mobile Fidelity, Lou Reed and Berlin. Mobile Fidelity, let's face it, they've been grubs for a couple of years there a while back. I still haven't forgiven them, particularly their refund scheme for their previous incorrectly titled or incorrectly accredited AAA recordings. Certainly didn't apply to overseas people. However, this was one I couldn't resist. And while I'm still remain skeptical of this label of all time, this is a fantastic reissue of a classic album. Next one up is Rain Parade with Emergency Third Rail Power Trip. David Roback comes into play here. A reissue that has been remastered and also includes a heap of unreleased tracks. So that's on the S1 label, and certainly if you are a fan of the Paisley Underground, you know how essential this album is, and this is the essential interpretation of that. Okay, next one's an archival release, but this one is Highrise. So if you're a psychedelic speed freak or a Stooge lover like my good self, this Japanese band recorded live in Tokyo are essential. This is a triple album, and it does have a gatefold sleeve that has a window that opens out, and certainly over the top action. It's actually only a double album, not a triple. Next up, we have Captain Beefheart, and this was a Record Store Day release, and the Captain's done a couple of Record Store Day releases, all of which are essential. We've had Trout Mask and Spotlight on clear vinyl. Once again, beautifully remastered. Once again, I broke my rule of not buying records I already have copies of for a couple of extra tracks, but I heard this and it sounded fantastic in the store and continued when it got to my place. Cocko Twins, this time with Harold Budd, so certainly a bit of an ambient feel to it. So good to have these back available on vinyl. This one's called Moon and the Melodies. This one is released on 4AD, and certainly is a fantastic pressing. I don't have a copy of an original to compare to, but I couldn't imagine it got too much better than this. Next we have Skullflow. Skullflow, the psychedelic noise rock trio consisting of Matthew Bower, Simon Stuart Dennison and Anthony DeFranco. This is a double LP of their 1991 released. Essential if you like your 90s freak rock. One for the math lovers, Don Cavaliero. What Burns Never Returns. A 2 LP reissue of a 2 LP set. One of the key math rock albums from the 90s finally gets a reissue. Some electronica, and this is the Green Album, as it's called, by the Orbital. A double album released on the London label. This has been remastered and provides the definitive view of this album. Next up, we have the Drop 19s and Delaware. There's 2 versions of this one that came out, and one's on Music on Vinyl, and one I think is on their own label. This is the Music on Vinyl version, who I do love. Always nice, clear pressings, and price is favourable as well. Certainly, if you like Dinosaur Jr., you're going to love the Drop 19s. Good to finally have this album back in print. Okay, techno, acid techno. Can you get any more 90s? This is Sasumi Yita and his classic Acid Mount Fuji. Double LP reissue of the original album, and then we get another LPs of unreleased tracks. If you like acid techno and the intelligent type of techno, you're going to like that one. Next up we have Roy Montgomery, the New Zealand underground star, with Temple IV. This was released on CD in the 90s. It's finally been given a vinyl release. Roy maintained his relationship with the Cranky album for this fantastic double LP. Certainly worth your while if you're interested in anything that Roy Montgomery has issued. Next up, we have No Means No with Wrong. This has been repressed on Alternative Tentacles. And it's the Canadian band's album that was probably going for about $200. Basically, so kind of good to have this punk classic back in print, and contains a couple of classics, and my particular favourite is Brainless Wonder. Good to see Alternative Tentacles keeping their key reissues or their key issues back in stock. Okay, next one up, we're hitting the Blues Hall of Fame here, and this does come with an Obi. This is the Bluesville series. I've got a couple of these. These are just fantastic. I'm a casual blues fan at best, and probably only own a couple of 100 blues albums, but this one's certainly a classic. As much as I would love an original, I find it hard to believe that anything could be any better than this version. It's clear, concise, and you feel like you're in the room. And they're certainly at an affordable price. So Craft Recordings doing a great bit of work there with their partnership with Analog Sounds. Next up we have the Replacements, Hootenanny. This is a Vinyl Me Please reissue, and I must say I'm a little bit disappointed about Vinyl Me Please changing some of their shipping policies for their overseas customers. If nothing else, I was getting quite a fantastic selection of hip-hop albums done properly. Anyway, the replacements for this release were Paul Westerberg, Bob Stinson, Tommy Stinson, and Chris Mars, the classic lineup. This mastering is cut by Ryan Smith at Sterling Sound, and certainly is the definitive version of this album. Another breaking of the rule of albums I already have that I purchased again in 2024. Okay, next up, just got to cover a little bit of cleavage there. This is Nurse with Wound and their classic Chance Meeting on a Dissecting Table of a Sewing Machine and Umbrella. That's the inner sleeve there. And there's the back, which has a nice metallic sleeve. This is a classic experimental album, and I guess the key people involved in this are Steve Stapleton, John Fothergill, and He-Man Pathak. The other key part with this is bar the fantastic silver print work is that it does contain the Nurse with Wound list. That's the list there. Fantastic list if you're into out there music or experimental music, and certainly if you wish to take up the challenge collecting all these releases, it's something worthwhile to do. I've probably got 3/4 of those releases in some form or another, some original for the ones I really like, and then some of the others on reissue for the ones I either can't find or maybe can't afford. Anyway, pivotal release of a classic underground noise rock album, Nurse with Wound. Okay, number 2. This is huge. Dr. John, the Night Tripper with Gree-Grees. How's that? Analog Productions, 2x45. I do have an original of this. Once again, breaking my rule. I'm not buying albums I already own. The reason I did this is because I actually think this is probably going to be a definitive version of it. So while it's nice to have the original in some of these cases, certainly the crackles and the pops that go with those releases are interesting to compare for the nuances to compare the differences with possibly the best version ever. Fantastic album. It is on the 2x45 format, which is not a favourite format of mine and something I prefer to avoid. However, this sounds fantastic and is my number 2 reissue of the year. And now for number 1, the Stooges. How could I go wrong with this? One of my favourite bands of all time. This is their self-titled album, remastered by Kevin Gray on the analog tapes. You get a couple little extras, which are key for Stoogophiles like myself. The key point here is you get to really hear the separation of the instruments, and this is just crazy and insane. Ron Ashton has never sounded so good. Dave Alexander is all over this. You can really hear his bass playing out well. Iggy's Iggy, but certainly the definitive reissue, and Rhino High Fidelity, which seems to be a label to check out and keep a bit of an eye on. I have seen some people thinking about various postal issues with the label, but mine have all come quite perfect, as you can see, with no issues whatsoever, and I'm living in Australia, so yeah, hard to know what's going on there. Okay, that's my number 1 archival reissue of the year. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.